Okay, question 6, part B, about IP addresses. A dynamic internet protocol IP address is allocated to the computer when it is connected to the network. Part 1. Identify the device on the network that can connect multiple devices and automatically assign or give them an IP address. So we just need to know what an IP address is. So you will have already know this, but an IP address is just a unique set of numbers that identifies a device that's connected to the network. So the network knows where to send the packets to. So it's just an address of a device. And each network, any device connected, would have to have its own unique IP address for the network to function properly. And the IP addresses are given out by a router. And the specific component inside the router that gives them out is called the DHCP. Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So let's pop that in. So we have router, and in brackets I'm going to put DHCP. So that's where we get the IP addresses from. Describe what is meant by a dynamic IP address. So we've established what an IP address is. It's a set of numbers that uniquely identifies a device on a network. And when we're describing what is meant by a dynamic IP address, perhaps we should start by saying what an IP address is. So is a unique set of numbers that identifies a device on a network. So we've explained what an IP address is. Let's talk about the dynamic part. So you can have static IP addresses and they don't change, they're fixed. Really handy for things like printers, where you're setting up all the devices to send their work to a printer. They're going to send it to a particular IP address. If that IP address kept changing, that's going to cause all sorts of problems. So static IP addresses are quite handy. The problem with static IP addresses though is if you use too many, you might find eventually you might have some devices that are no longer even working or connected to the network, but they're hogging IP addresses, they're using up IP addresses. So a dynamic IP address is an IP address that can change. So let's go ahead and talk about that. So dynamic IP addresses can change, and how they work is when you're given a dynamic IP address, you're generally given a lease, and a lease is just a time limit. So let's say you connect your phone to a network, you're given an IP address, you might be given a lease of 24 hours. And what that means is that if you connect your device excuse me, again within 24 hours, the lease restarts and you keep that IP address. If you don't connect within 24 hours, that IP address goes back into the pool of IP addresses and can be given to another device. And when you connect again after 24 hours, you get a new IP address and you start a new lease. So let's see if we can, we need one more mark I think for this. So dynamic IP addresses can change. Dynamic IP addresses have a lease if you do not connect within the time for the lease, then the IP address will be given to a different device that connects to the network. I've obviously written far too much there. Let's look at the mark scheme. So for B part 1, it's the router, and then for part 2, so we've talked about uniquely identifies a device on a network. So an IP address is a unique set of numbers that identifies a device on a network. So we've got that. We've talked about the fact that they can change. Dynamic IP addresses can change, and we've talked about how they change. And it says here each time the device is connected to the network. So it can change if it connects outside of the lease time. If it connects within the lease time, then it won't change. So they're kind of saying that in a sort of less detailed way, but we've got here dynamic IP addresses have a lease. If you do not connect within the time for the lease, then the IP address will be given to a different device that connects to the network. So we're saying that we're basically saying it can change depending on whether you're within the lease time or not. So we're going to give that mark as well. Right, let's stop this one, on to the next one. Thank you very much.